Going to be touching on the top plays on this Thursday Night Football slate. Let's go ahead and get into it. And just real quickly, a recap from last week. Was able to take down not one, but two mini maxes last week. So pretty awesome stuff there. Hopefully we'll be able to do that again this week. All right, so looking at the slate, we have Pittsburgh versus Atlanta. We're going to start out with that game. Looking at it right now, we do know that the Pittsburgh Steelers starters are going to start, okay? The question is, how much are these guys going to play? Someone like Kenny Pickett, it doesn't really make sense for him to get a bunch of playing time because, well, he and the rest of the Steelers starters have looked pretty sharp. This is something that we typically do get slightly before playing time. Like, this is something I put out there on the 9-to-5 Discord. Yeah, last week, pretty much saying that Ron Rivera was saying that Sam Howell was going to get a good half of football. That is something that we got basically 20 minutes before lineup lock, which can be tough to absorb the information because you don't know exactly if the coaches are being truthful or not, although that's typically something that we do get in some capacity before lineup lock. So if you guys are 9-to-5 members, be in the Discord chat. I'll be trying to update that before lineup lock. But we do know that like their star players are probably not going to play, it seems like, or play that much. It's probably going to be the least amount that they played. So someone like Najee Harris, is he a star player? I don't exactly know if a lot of people would call him that, but he is someone that I don't really expect to play that much. I would think that would mean a lot more playing time for Anthony McFarland, who really has kind of struggled. He had a touchdown in week 1, but besides that, the stats have really been terrible. He's the running back that makes sense to get the most playing time in a game in which you're playing your 4 stringers, players that might be on your practice squad, players that you're not too concerned about. That being said, at the quarterback position, not exactly something we need to go crazy with. At the receiver position, how much playing time does someone like Austin get? You know, the player that really came through for us in preseason week 1. Do we need to go back to the well with him? Potentially. Not a terrible play. And with Hakeem Butler and Cody White out, that is going to leave some playing time open. And we did see someone like Gunner get 7 targets last week. And I don't think that was too shocking. I mean, he's that type of player that, you know, he can get open. He's not going to bust any big plays, but he's, you know, a short yardage guy, a guy that an inexperienced or bad quarterback is going to get the ball to. So not terrible there. And then just looking at the tight end position, I do think we want to potentially go back to Washington, who really hasn't done much thus far. But in a game in which the backups are probably going to play a little bit more, he is the tight end play that makes the most sense. So for this team, I don't exactly love anyone too much. Maybe Gunner potentially. That's really it, I think, right now, as it sits based on the information that we have. Now we'll go ahead and flip it and get into Atlanta. For Atlanta, it makes sense for them to give someone like Desmond Ridder some more playing time. This team is young. Ridder's honestly probably the worst starting quarterback in the league as it sits right now. And I say that because thus far the preseason quarterback play has been impressive. And he hasn't even been terrible either. Like, super impressed with the preseason quarterback play. By far the best I can remember in recent memory. But it still makes sense for him to get some playing time. If he doesn't, I'm very curious to see what they do at the backup quarterback position because Taylor Heineke ended up playing about 70% of the snaps last week. It might be a situation in which we are maybe thinking about playing Heineke in some and then also Woodside in some because Woodside in the first game played a ton as well. Now, he was terrible, okay? I don't think we want to play him, but maybe we get news that he's going to play a full half or maybe he's going to play a majority of the game. Then maybe we'd probably have to be looking at him. I would say Heineke maybe we're looking at in the sense that they might get, a full half of football. Maybe it's 20 passing attempts. He'd be the one I want to go with. The player that I want to call out again is Godwin Igwebuike. And I definitely butchered that last name, but he's been someone that has been very impressive thus far this preseason. Like basically on every single game thus far, he's been someone that has been standing out, busting open some big plays. He's going to get used a little bit more in the passing game. That's something that has been missing thus far, but he has been impressive. That Atlanta Falcons line is a line that we know is good for rushing purposes. And so for someone that's going to probably get 10 carries again, like he has last week and the previous weekend, a majority of the work, he is the player that I like the most just because he's looked the best. So to me, he's kind of an easy click at the running back position as it sits right now. Obviously, we could get news that would change the slate, then we'd have to adjust. From there, though, I want to call out Carlos Washington Jr. as well. Kind of got lucky with a touchdown last week. I said, Godwin we'd want to be on, or Godwin we'd want to be on the most, and then Washington as well. He just made sense to get a lot of work as well in that offense. And so he also had a lot of work in week 1, not as much in week 2, but still enough of a workload to suggest that we should be playing him. I feel like if we are using the 9-5 lineup optimizer, we are kind of running out a player group. I want at least one of these two in all my builds. I think that's going to be the route to go, just because I expect them to get a full half of football and they should get a bunch of work. All these other guys, Patterson still banged up. Robinson, doesn't make sense to get him a lot of work. Algier, maybe it's a half of football, but I expect it to be those two the most. And at the receiver position, do want to call out that they are kind of banged up. They got Hodge banged up and Hart banged up. Those two are not expected to play. And so one player that's kind of been standing out is Josh Ali. If we're searching for a receiver position, maybe we do get news that Taylor Heineke is going to start and we want to have some exposure to him, then we would maybe want to play a receiver with him, stack with him. This would be the one I would go with. I don't really like touching Atlanta Falcons receivers because they spread it out a lot. That's just something that's been happening for the past 5 years, it seems like. At the tight end position, I don't mind Parker Hesse, who continues to get a lot of work. Had 2 receptions last week. This is a player that's just going to be on the field around 40% of the snaps, so he shouldn't be a bust to your lineup. At the tight end position, the biggest thing that we want to do is not take a 0. That should be him as a play this week. And I will say the Falcons defense has been very good. If we get news that the Steelers starters are only going to play, 1 or 2 series, then Falcons D, and especially if they have their starters in, that'd probably be the route I'd want to go the most. So for now, I'm going to pencil them in. Let's go and move on into the Indianapolis Colts. So we did get news that we got news that Anthony Richardson is going to start and play in this game. Don't have any news on playing time for him. I would imagine, maybe 3 series max, maybe a full quarter, maybe a quarter and a half, but not too much work for him, okay? And then my biggest question is, what does that mean for Gardner Minshew? Because last week we saw Sam Ehlinger actually get the most work, and he was pretty impressive, I would say, in that game, preseason stud, if you will. I would assume that probably Minshew maybe wouldn't get that much work in this game just because they sat out Richardson last week. Maybe they sit out Minshew this week, and then Sam Ehlinger gets a lot more work. That is kind of what I'm assuming. Once again, this is something that hopefully we get before lineup lock. I'll try to keep people updated on the Discord chat when possible. It's just tough to get that stuff out on YouTube and Twitter. I like to have a centralized location. That's kind of why I'm just deferring to the Discord chat. That being said, I will try to put it out on Twitter as well if I can. It's more difficult when you have so many different sources going out there and whatnot. At the running back position for them, Jake Funk actually led them in terms of snaps. Now, Jake Funk has not really looked good, but he's gotten a touchdown each of the last 2 games. If he's going to be playing the most snaps and in a game that really doesn't matter, maybe we have some exposure to him. With Zach Moss being banged up and with them trying to trade Jonathan Taylor, it doesn't really make sense for Deion Jackson to get a lot of playing time. Only played in 15% of the snaps last week. And then Evan Hall as well. It doesn't make too much sense for him to get that much playing time as well. So that's kind of why I like Jake Funk the most. And then just for what it's worth, like Jason Huntley and even Drake haven't looked that good, but Huntley has been terrible. You can fall into the end zone, but he has been bad. So I'm probably not touching him. Receiver-wise, very much spread out. They did recently sign James Washington. And he came in and played 30% of the snaps, which is crazy for a guy that just signed, right? Maybe that number bumps up to 40, 50%. The one player that did play a bunch is another preseason stud, Juwann Winfree. He's a really good player in the preseason last year for the Green Bay Packers. And he ended up gaining a decent target share, 6 targets in that game. Also scored a touchdown in this game, but guys, this touchdown was extremely lucky. Look at this. Great pause job by me here. This should be a pick. Gardner Minshew, that was such a terrible throw. Good concentration, though, by Juwann Winfree to make that catch. That is a very difficult pass to catch when you got a defender's hands that seemingly are going to catch the ball and it goes straight through their hands, maybe tip it a little bit. That's a more difficult catch than it looks like. So good for him to catch it. But I want to call that out. Touchdown was very much fluky, but that happens a lot in the NFL. The thing we're focusing on is the 6 targets. Now, Amari Rodgers is a player that I really don't mind. Okay, he ended up playing 31% of the snaps, and that is something that obviously we need to see go up, but still playing 31% of the snaps, 4 targets, 5.2 DraftKings points, we would certainly take that. And then one thing I want to call out as well is Will Mallory. He's a tight end, okay? And he ended up getting about 36% of the snaps as well. He has been someone that they've been hyping up a little bit there. They were excited to get him on the field last week, and he came through. And maybe they were somewhat limited in snaps because of the injury that he had in the previous week. So he's someone that maybe gets a little bit more work. So here are the snap counts from the Eagles game last week. We can see Ngata, the receiver that's been getting a lot of hype for the Eagles, 57% of the snaps. That is a huge snap share in the preseason. I think he's going to be someone that probably makes a lot of sense to get that amount of playing time as well. Tanner McKee as well, 57% of the snaps. I think those two are going to make for a great stacking option there just because they should be on the field together. That is something we can certainly go back to the well with. We see Deion Kang, Allen, both getting a bunch of work. We saw Brooks get a bunch of work at the running back position as well. And I'm just calling this out because I think this is something we could see again. Unfortunately, one of our favorite plays on the slate, Tyree Cleveland, a guy who's getting a lot of hype out of camp, a guy that looked pretty good as well, played in 41% of the snaps. He got injured in that game. And just looking at guys, like the Eagles receiver room is pretty banged up. Don't expect A.J. Brown or Smith to play that much. And so with that being said, this is something we need to tune into tomorrow, 30 minutes before lineup lock, is we're probably going to play Ngata there. He's looked good, looked the part. Like last week, had 5 targets. We would certainly take 3 receptions for 39 yards in preseason DFS. Now, one thing that we need to pay attention to is Greg Ward. Some of that was pretty low owned last week. Yes, it was because he was questionable and we need to get confirmation that he was going to play. He did end up playing, but now he's currently questionable again. My expectation is now that he's probably going to sit. So if he does sit as well, that is leaving a lot of snaps available there. I think we'd be forced into Ngata as a play. Maybe a little bit of Devin Allen, who's been having a pretty good practice week thus far this week, just mostly out of necessity, I would say. But he is someone that drew, 3 targets and obviously did play a decent amount. So certainly someone I think we should be looking at there as well. Now, guys, my assumption here at the quarterback position is going to be that Jalen Hurts doesn't play. And then I also don't really see Igwebuike in that much playing time. Last week, he didn't play at all. It was Marcus Mariota and Tanner McKee. They probably want to get a good look at both of them. Actually, there might be a little bit of quarterback battle here. If we get news that Marcus Mariota is going to play a full half of football again, he is certainly someone we should be looking at because of the stackability that we have. But right now, I would say Tanner McKee is probably the most logical play, and especially when we're trying to stack some Philly players. I think we could certainly be looking at that. And then in terms of some other Philly players that we want to be on, we did see Brooks end up getting 44% of the snaps last week. Now, that didn't really equate to that much production. I mean, we saw Trey Sermon be much more productive while only playing 29% of the snaps, but he was able to have 5 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown, like much more impressive. Did have a bad fumble, but was able to bounce back pretty well there. And Brooks only had 1 reception as well, but he's the one play that kind of makes the most sense to get a decent amount of playing time. So yeah, we could roll with him a little bit. We do need to get news on the starters playing or not. And this is news that we have gotten in every game thus far. Swift sat out in week 1, Gainwell sat out in week 1, Swift sat out in week 2. Like that is stuff that we got prior to lineup block. That's something I think we'll get again. And so tight end wise, is Tyree Jackson's going to get about 35% of the snaps again this week. He is certainly someone I think we should be looking at once again. If we are going to be stacking the Eagles players, that is a play that does make sense. So like if we are running out more of the Colts players, this is what we want to be looking at. We can flip it around, maybe put a little bit more of an emphasis there than on the Eagles players just because they're a little bit more banged up. Then we could go something like this a little bit more. That's how we can kind of finagle it. That's going to be all for this video. Just to remind you guys, other promo code that's currently going on the 9to5 website. Get 50% off your first 9to5 membership. This is going to be available for new members only. A few more days left of this, guys. The Tour Championship in golf is here. It starts on Thursday. So 4 more days left of that promo code. Take advantage of that. Get the promo code playoffs and you get your first month for 50% off. So it's a $10 membership. Get it for $5. That's going to be all for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the coverage. If you did know what to do, please give a like and subscribe. Let's have a good slate. And as always, let's keep cashing.